again. This is the 25th of June 2026, and I don't know, this is an naughty thoughty really, maybe to some extent. As it is Pride Month, still for the next couple of days, I'm going to share some of my thoughts on gender and sexuality, because I do have quite a lot of opinions, some of which are maybe slightly hot takes. If anyone wants to have an argument with me in the comments, you know, great. Let's argue in the comments. Never get any comments anyway. Just so you kind of know where this is coming from. I don't really identify as anything, to be honest. I've sort of been a bit of everything over many years, and I have to tick a box and just say I'm bisexual because that covers everything. And I'm married now anyway, so it's a bit of a moot point, really. I'm a sort of past caring asexual, really. Gender and pronouns, well, I suppose I'm female, that'll do. I have very little feeling of internal gender, and I don't really understand people who do. But because I don't understand them, you know, it doesn't mean that I dislike them or I want them to be unhappy and have a hard life. I'm pretty much pro consenting adults doing whatever they want in the privacy of their own homes. And I do worry a lot that our human rights are very much under threat. For a long time, when I was young, in my teens, in my 20s, sort of late 90s, 00s, I thought society as a whole seemed to be making progress with the gender and sexuality business. You know, it felt like, you know, more and more people were becoming accepting of the idea that not everybody is cis-het. It seemed like, you know, gay marriage was legalised. So more and more transgender, gender neutral, non-binary people becoming, you know, open about what they were. There were discussions about these things online, in the news, everywhere that these sort of things get discussed, let's say. And people seem to be just being very sensible about these things altogether. But I feel like over the last few years, there's been a lot of backward steps. I did look this up. I looked this up before I began. 64 countries have laws against two consenting adult men in private having sex. 38 have laws against two consenting adult women in private doing what they feel they must. 12 actually don't necessarily impose the death penalty, but potentially could. I mean, does nobody else find that absolutely terrifying? It's not just that this is a kind of steady state. You know, there are several countries that have laws against gay people acting on their impulses. I don't know. Gay people just being gay people together. It just feels like, maybe not every day, certainly every week in the news, there's been a crackdown on being you know, people's ability to express themselves. And especially transgender people. I find there's a lot of anti-trans feeling all of a sudden for no reason. For no reason. Trans people have not been causing any sort of a problem. I mean, I did do a video a couple of months ago about, how I, as a tall woman, am affected by transphobia. As I say, I don't understand how trans people feel. I have no idea why it happens, what compels them to want to change their gender presentation. But, I fully support their right to do that. And I feel like, it is, this crackdown on transgenderism is also encroaching on other people's rights. As I explained, I never felt self-conscious about my height until, I started seeing news reports about tall women being accosted in public toilets by somebody who thought they were trans just because they were tall, I never sort of questioned whether I ought to be taking my son into the public toilet with me, until I started seeing things in the news about people who got into fights in pubs because, they took their son in the women's toilet, or a man took his very small daughter in the women's toilet, And again, these sort of arguments were not happening just a few years ago. Even 10 years ago, if anybody suggested we ought to be testing female athletes to make sure that they really are female before we let them compete. We ought to be examining their genitals. We ought to be doing hormone tests on them. Someone would stare at them like they'd grown two heads. This is very new, and it's actually happening. I've seen several news reports about various sporting bodies from, little local clubs right up to the Olympics, proposing that female athletes should be tested before they're allowed to join the team, before they're allowed to compete in the contest. And it's really worrying as well. For me, as the mother of a daughter who likes playing sports. I mean, she's only very small at the moment. If she does, grow up to, want to join a team or something, is this something she's going to have to go through to, join a football team? To join a swimming club? Why are we even having these conversations? No, it's not because trans people are causing any sort of a problem. It's not because, trans women are winning all the competitions in sports. It's not because there's been a rash of sexual assaults by trans women in women's changing rooms. Now, it's because we've just suddenly got this trans panic. I mean, can it purely be because J.K. Rowling said we all need to worry about it? I just cannot fathom how it's happened, to the extent it's happened so quickly in a society that until quite recently was moving forwards with these things. And I find it extremely worrying that such a lot of people are guided by, I don't know, by what they saw in the news. And, famous people who until recently I would have said were, politically pretty okay, all seem to have been jumping on this bandwagon. There's this sort of 50-50 divide between, famous people who support transgender people and, celebrities who are against transgender people. And why is this a thing that we talk about now? When did it become a major part of someone's public persona, how they feel about trans issues? And I see a similar sort of backlash against anything that doesn't fit the heteronormative narrative. I feel that, I don't know if there's any statistics on this. I feel that I am seeing more homophobia now than I was a few years ago. You know, I, as someone who is not heterosexual, do tend to notice these things. I kind of feel it as a personal attack. And I feel that all that progress that has been made in the late 20th, early 21st century is going backwards extremely fast. My son asked me recently, he sometimes asks me things that, you know, he's heard his friends talking about, kind of vaguely sexual things, like they do when they're that sort of age. His friends are sort of 8, 9, 10. And they hear words, they want to know what they mean. He asked me things like, you know, what does sex mean? You know, what's a pervert? This sort of thing. And I try and explain things to him in a way that, you know, I'm not lying, I'm sort of giving him some information, but, you know, not necessarily, you know, giving him all the details just yet. And he was asking me quite recently, what's homophobia? I don't know where he'd heard the word, but he asked me what is homophobia, and I kind of explained that, you know, there's a lot of people all over the world for various reasons really hate gay people. And some of it comes from religion, some of it comes from, you know, old traditions, some of it's just societal. You know, it's because all the friends hate gays, so they think they've got to hate gays as well. And I explained that, you know, in the past, in this country, you know, not very long ago, only when Granny was a little girl, it used to actually be illegal for men to be gay, you know, for two men to have a relationship. And I sort of looked a bit puzzled, and he says, why was it illegal? Now, as anyone who's read the first thing about socialism, feminism, etc. knows, it's very important for the patriarchy, for capitalism, for the ruling class generally, to maintain the heteronormative hegemony, to maintain a steady supply of minions, basically. And there's an element of divide and rule as well, I suppose. As long as men and women sort of hate each other enough that they argue amongst themselves, you know, there'll never be a revolution. But I can't exactly explain that in a way that an 8-year-old who doesn't know the first thing about these things can understand. So I just sort of had a bit of a think, and I said, well, because the government was homophobic. I thought, well, that is the explanation, really, isn't it? Why is it illegal to be gay in 64 countries? Because the government's homophobic. It's not because they are any sort of threat. It's not that they're causing any sort of public health issue. It's not that, you know, being gay in and of itself is bad. It's just that these governments are composed of homophobes. And it stays illegal because society as a whole is composed largely, not entirely. No society is composed entirely of one opinion. Largely of homophobes who aren't going to react to it, who are going to willingly take part in the oppression of the gay people. And by extension, anyone who is perceived to be gay, bisexuals, you know, anyone who is gender non-conforming. yeah, and it also affects people who are asexual as well. You know, there's people who do not have a life partner, who are sort of single long term. You know, that they are often perceived to be gay as well. You know, oh, why don't you settle down? Must be gay. I think portrayal of gays in the media was, again, it was improving for a long time, but it seems to have come to a halt. You know, there was a time in up until the 20-teens when, you know, we were seeing an increasing number of gay romances and just gay side characters in films and dramas and so on. And they were just sort of there as if it was, you know, perfectly fine and normal, and nobody really talked about it to some extent. But then that, again, it seems to have come to an end. I mean, I don't actually watch telly anymore. I haven't watched telly for a long time, but, you know, you used to see things kind of in the news about, oh, there's this great drama on about a gay couple. Oh, there's a film about, you know, someone who, you know, is a middle-aged man who discovered he's actually gay and has a great time. And it just seems to have come to an end. You know, you don't see these reviews and you know, headlines about you know, the latest groundbreaking gay drama anymore. Is it because it's all been done and it's old hat now, or is it because there's potential for a backlash? I mean, Reform, the second biggest party in the UK now by poll results, actually has in its manifesto that any school teacher who says that there is more than one gender, or who mentions transgenderism in a lesson, should be banned from the profession. Now that is the second biggest party in the UK, has that in their manifesto. We're in a downward spiral. I mean, this is even before we get into, you know, treatment of women, you know, the rise of the alpha male and so on. Racism, of course, is back in fashion. But yes, Pride Month. What I was going to say about gay stuff generally. Right. LGBTQIA+. Right. Now, I think that's a bit long. It's sort of the accepted title at the moment, but it's just a lot of a mouthful. It's a lot to write down, and it's inaccurate as well. You know, it's suggesting that everybody who's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and agender, and all those other people that we can't quite fit in right now, but you know who you are, have all the same sort of issues that apply to them, and they're all sort of a homogenous mass, which isn't really true. Are they individual groups? Are we giving them each a letter? Except for the ones that are just sort of, you know, over there, plus, you know, the other ones. that didn't make the final cut, or are they one group? You know, because not everybody can be in every single one of those letters. I mean, some of them contradict each other. And then there's arguments about, you know, what letters should we include, what letters shouldn't we include. If we're going to have this letter, we ought to have this letter. There's an anti-trans gay community as well. No, what is it? LGB without the T. It's like they don't realise that they're next. I've just not got any words for that, really. The LGB without the T. How do you get to that sort of opinion? How can you be gay, lesbian, bi, and, you know, think about, you know, read about, educate yourself about sort of sexuality and gender issues, and still find yourself being transphobic? I read once, I read this article about how, you know, there's this terrible problem with men pretending to be trans so they can trick lesbians into having sex with them, and then these lesbians feel like they don't want to be transphobic, so they feel like they've sort of got to sleep with these men who are dressing as trans women. And I thought, well, I'm not going to say it's never happened, but what if a man pretends to be a trans woman so he can have sex with a straight man? What if a woman pretends to be a man so she can have sex with a gay man? Why are we specifically aiming this at men pretending to be trans women? It's like the whole, you know, who's allowed in the toilets debate all over again. And honestly, if someone has so little confidence in themselves that they are feeling pressured into having sex with someone that they are not attracted to, then you've got to ask, what are they actually doing on the casual sex scene anyway? So it's not compulsory. Has that ever actually happened? You know, do men pretend that they're women? If they want to have sex with a woman, why don't they just have sex with a woman who likes men? It's... Again, I just cannot fathom the mindset that sort of tries to pin these things on trans women. Why do you care about trans women? They're such a small proportion of the population. They cause so few problems. Why have they become this sort of public hate figure? And it's not even transgender people as a whole, it's trans women who seem to be singled out for this hatred. You know, they don't care about it. You ask them, yeah, so what about trans men then? And they just sort of mysteriously stop replying. Okay, controversial opinion number 2. Right, that's enough of that. Controversial opinion number 2. LGBTQIA plus is not a great acronym. That's controversial opinion number one. I did actually once see this this alternative, SAGA, SAGA, Sexuality and Gender Acceptance Movement, which, if we're talking about everybody together, you know, everybody who is not part of the heteronormative scene, yeah, that fits. It's short, it's simple, it covers everybody, and then if you do want to talk about something that applies only to, you know, gay men or to agender people, or you can talk about them as an individual group. But that never really caught on. I don't know what happened to that. I thought that was really good, but no. Anyway, controversial opinion number two. This is something that I've found myself thinking. I personally have a terrible lifelong spin, which is classic situation comedy. Right? I know a lot of it is very politically problematic. Some of it does make me cringe. There's a lot of things that I have, a lot of series that I have gone off on a second viewing because I just cannot justify it. But yeah, I wonder how much the portrayal of gay men in the mid-century comedies actually improved general public perception of gays generally. Okay, you know, the general public's perception of homosexuality as a whole. I mean, there are some that are very bad. Steptoe and Son, right? Steptoe and Son has two plot lines, actually. It's, as a whole, it's politically very good. It's held up very well, but there's these two episodes where there's they meet a character who sort of seems a bit effeminate, maybe is a bit creepy, and you know, Albert goes, "Oh, he's a buff," and Harold goes, "Oh, just because he's got good taste doesn't mean he's gay," you know. And one, Harold actually sort of ends up getting taken back to this man's house, and he's definitely hitting on him, but then he realises at the end what's happening and runs. Now, I mean, that's the sort of classic image that really would be better off without, I think. This image that, you know, gays are weird and creepy and they're going to try and put their hands on you or whatever. There's another one in Rising Damp which I don't really know what to make of, to be honest. It's one of those you could sit and discuss for a while. Now, I mean, Rising Damp I did sort of talk about at length once. It's one of these let's all laugh at the funny racist comedies, which, you know, you do need a strong stomach for it in places. And it looks quite primitive by modern standards, but you know, it's sort of coming from the right place. But again, they have this housemate who comes along just for one episode, and you know, this sort of argument: oh, is he gay? Is he not gay? Is he gay? Is he not? And there's a scene where he kind of almost sort of sexually assaults Rigsby, right? You can sort of argue, yeah, well, maybe Rigsby deserved it, you know. He's been doing that to Miss Jones for time immemorial. But then again, there's this perception that, you know, gays are sort of creepy weirdos who want to try and grab your ass while you're not looking, kind of thing. I won't reveal the sort of twist in the end of that one. But again, it's oh, I will, because I don't. What's the chances anyone's going to actually sit and watch that episode through? Who hasn't already seen it? It actually turns out he's not gay. He's actually trying to chat up Miss Jones, and she's quite into it. Anyway, I mean, obviously, yes, he might have been bisexual, but we're not really up to that point in 1970s comedy. But yeah, I think there was a trend, the positive trend for putting in gay characters. They weren't necessarily described as the gay one, but they were gay coded. It was made very obvious that that's what they were supposed to be. But they were kind of very much one of the gang, and were portrayed as being sort of perfectly happy with themselves, and they weren't going to try and lay hands on anyone who wasn't wanting it. I mean, characters like Mr. Humphreys and Lukewarm in Porridge, Gloria, Ain't Half Hog Mum. They're sort of seen as being, not necessarily just a normal guy, but they were everybody's friend. They were a bit of a character. They stood out. They were sort of shown as being flamboyant and feminine, but they weren't in any way scary. I mean, we could go back to, even further back to kind of Kenneth Williams' characters in Hancock's Half Hour. He was their housemate. He was, obviously he was putting on a really camp voice. Which Kenneth Williams, obviously. But he was, he's just their housemate. He's not scary. And again, it's this very limited image of what it is to not be heterosexual, to be, to some extent, gender non-conforming. But to make them into your friends, to make them into popular characters, to be played by actors who often were, very much like that in real life, I think that must have been a positive. I think to go from zero from being gay being actually illegal, to being a source of great shame, to portraying these people as being as members of the public. I think that must have been a big leap. And again, it's one of these things that we can look back on with modern eyes and say, oh, but this is stereotyping. It's a very cliched idea of what a gay man is like. It's relying on the audience, thinking, oh, is he a bit one of them? Is he a bit? Oh, I think he plays for the other team. Do you? But it was a step forward in terms of making gay men. I mean, lesbians weren't invented back then, apparently. I don't know. Making gay men seem approachable, making them into your friends, your neighbours, your colleagues. Actually, I did put something on Facebook about this once. What do you think? And there's somebody I know. I know from doing political activism years ago, who's he's a gay man in his 60s, who said that as a teenager, 50 years ago, he felt like, you know, he sort of thought, am I gay? He was thinking, you know, am I attracted to men? You know, what am I, you know, what is my identity? And he saw these images of the really camp, flamboyant gays on the telly and thought, well, I don't identify with them. I don't think I look like that at all. But if that's what a gay man is, what am I? And it sort of made him feel a bit confused, which, again, is a point that I hadn't actually considered. But yes, I suppose that is, you know, another side to the discussion. And again, it is just a particular subset of gay men. I think there has been a backlash against that kind of comedy campness. There is a subset of people who say, well, we shouldn't be portraying gay men in these sort of stereotypical ways. You know, there are all kinds of people, you know, all sorts of different personalities and presentations who identify themselves as gay. And also, you know, there is no equivalent lesbian or bisexual. But I don't know, there are a lot of very camp men around. You know, it's not unusual. And I think they deserve to be represented as much as anybody else. You know, so some of them actually sort of really lean into it and play it up and enjoy it, so, you know, everybody knows what the deal is. I mean, they don't necessarily have to. Then, you know, as I was saying, you know, my friend on Facebook, he says that, you know, that's not how he sees himself at all. Fair enough. But I think they, you know, they do deserve to be represented as much as anybody else. And you know, there's a discussion to be had, I think, about why do we consider being really camp to be a negative thing? You know, why do we feel like, why is there this sort of compulsion to say, well, not all gay men are like that? You know, and why can't they just enjoy it if they really want to? Why do they feel, why is there this sort of stigma attached to it? Yeah, oh yeah, my controversial opinion number 3. Okay, that's enough about number 2. Controversial opinion number 3 is how it's described as I was born this way. I mean, I have 2 issues with this. One is nobody's actually born with a sexual orientation, right? That's something that develops at puberty. Now, it's not, little kids are not eyeing each other up across nursery school, right? I mean, yeah, as they get older, they might be curious. You know, as I say, my son often hears words either from the telly or from his friends, and someone comes and asks me, what does this mean? What does that mean? He's sort of interested in what happens, what people do, how it all works. But you know, they don't actually feel the urge to act on, you know, to you know, physically want to have sex with anybody until they hit puberty. You know, it's impossible. You know, they don't have the hormones. It's something that develops psychologically over a long time. there's probably a lot of very complex reasons, a lot of chance involved. You know, why are some people attracted to this gender and why some to that gender, and why do some people not really discriminate? It's maybe there is something that you are born with, or some sort of tendency you're born with that would you know, influence, you know, how you feel as you grow up. But yeah, nobody's actually born with a sexuality. They don't have it for several years. And then the other thing that, you know, describing how I was born like this, it feels like it's describing your gender or sexuality as some sort of a medical condition that you can't help. You know, like it's a disability or something. You know, I was born with no legs, so you can't expect me to do any of these things. I have some sort of condition. There's something about me that's you know, not developed in the normal way, and it's yeah, it might just be me overthinking things, but I feel like it's also not really really talking about why anybody's even asking what your sexuality is. Maybe it is a choice. Maybe you did decide one day, right, I'm bored of dating men, maybe I'll date women for a bit instead. I've known people who've done that. I've done that. I've sort of thought, well, I've been on this dating site for a while. I've only met a lot of men. I'll try putting that I'm gay and see if I, you know, see what the situation is with women. You know, I sort of feel like, why is it a problem if you did choose your sexuality? If you do feel like, well, I've had a lot of bad experiences with this gender, I will try the other, or well, let's just try it and see if I like it. Well, whatever. You don't have to sort of go with what you were when you were 13 for the rest of your life. It's why do we feel the need to say, I was born like this, when there's nothing actually wrong with it? It's not some sort of a defect. Am I explaining myself well? I'm not sure I'm explaining myself well. Right, say my marriage had come to an end for whatever reason. I was on a date with a lovely woman who said, right, I've had a lot of bad experiences with men, so I want to date women now. I'm not actually a lesbian, I just want to try seeing some women and, you know, seeing how I get on with it. You know, that would not actually affect me one bit. You know, she's still there on the date with me. Potentially, you know, we could go on to having a lovely relationship. Potentially, you know, we could fall out over something and I don't see her again. What difference does it make whether she was always a lesbian since she was in her teens, or whether she was a bisexual who's seen a few men, bored of men, wants to see some women now? whether, whatever her reason for being there, how that doesn't affect me. Even as someone who she is apparently on a date with, potentially seeking a relationship with, if she's there, that's fine. That's the. It doesn't affect anything else. I don't know, it's getting a bit late and I'm tired, and I still don't really feel like I've explained my point. Yes, okay, right. Maybe some people do sort of naturally develop into, gay people, bi people, heterosexual people if they really feel the need. Maybe some people later in life feel that, consciously make a decision that they are only going to see one gender or the other. So what? Whose business is it? Who cares? Even the person that they are potentially considering a relationship with, if they are potentially considering a relationship with that person, then, how they got into that situation, whether it's, a conscious thought, I want to be with this gender, or, how they've felt as long as they can remember, they are still considering relationship with that person. And, their friends, relatives, neighbours, people who hardly know them. It doesn't affect any of them either. I think a lot of people are very attached to this this phrase, I was born this way, and maybe don't necessarily feel that it's incorrect, or that they want to stop using it. I know a lot of people who've said, well, I knew I don't necessarily know these people, I have heard these people speak, who say, I knew I was, this gender, this sexuality from being a small child. Okay, some of us don't, some of us change as they get old. I mean, you can naturally fluctuate from one thing to another. And then there's the caged sexuals as well. They're people who feel that their sexuality has been changed because they've had some sort of traumatic event. Are these people not allowed to do as they feel because they were it's not how they developed as they grew up. Okay, I'll leave that one. I tried to explain it 3 times and that's enough. What is the future for the gender and sexuality acceptance movement? As I personally would prefer it was called, but it isn't. The LGBTQIA plus community. I mean, even calling it a community, it makes it sound like we all know each other. We don't. What is the future? I'm, as I said at the beginning, I'm quite worried that things are going downhill very quickly. I think it's part and parcel of the rise of the far right generally. As I'm sure we're all aware, racism and sexism and all the things that we were doing away with 20 or so years ago are back with a vengeance. For a variety of reasons. I don't know if it's been engineered by anyone in any particular. I don't know if there's anyone we can blame specifically. Maybe it's just a kind of natural fluctuation. Well, yes, I realise that things that are presented in the media, things that the government does, are not necessarily natural. They're down to policy, down to the people who are voted in. And everybody has an agenda, but yeah, these things do seem to go in cycles. You know, the amount of persecution certain groups experience just tend to go in cycles historically. I feel we're on a downward spiral. How long will it go on for? Where does it end? What is actually going to happen to all the lovely gays and trans and bisexual and asexual and intersex and gender fluid and so on people, all the pluses, you know, those people that we that didn't make the cut for the first few letters. What happens to us all? I don't know. And as I say, it's very concerning. I think there's, what can one individual do about it? Other than react to it when you see it. Be careful who you vote for. It's one of these things, you know, as long as if you stay in your little bubble with your own friends who, you know, are politically okay, then you can feel like the world is a safe place. As soon as you step outside that, as soon as you start looking at comment sections in public Facebook groups, as soon as you actually start reading news stories about you know, what's being done to combat the scourge of trans women who want to play football, then you realise it isn't. And I find that very worrying. I mean, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there for now. That's the end of that. See you in the next one.